Hello. Hi. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Stop. Listen, I'll be overrunning. I've got so much to talk about. And thank you so much to Lynn. Thank you to Seabourn for inviting me here. I have been to the Isle of Wight many, many times, so it was a thrill to come back again and to talk about wonderful Wimbledon, because I wrote my autobiography a few years ago when I retired. But I felt there were so many stories about Wimbledon, because Wimbledon has been such a big part of my life, that I knew that there was another book, and I wanted to share all the stories of the people who had inspired me and people who I've met along the way. But I've got to say that this man here, Mr. McEnroe, is a very, very special guy. I had the privilege of working with him right the way from 1993, when I first joined the BBC. For those 30 years, he was part of our commentary team even back then. And he misbehaved on this day. This is the middle Sunday of Wimbledon in 2022, which was my last Wimbledon. And I told everybody, I don't want any send-off. I just want to go quietly. I don't want to do anything. Did he listen? No, he didn't. And there we were on centre court to introduce all the great champions onto court. You know, Federer made a surprise appearance. Rafa was there, Andy, Billie Jean, Chrissy. Everybody was there. And right at the end, he said, we're going to miss you, Sue, and got the audience. He said, Wimbledon is not going to be the same without you, and got the audience. The whole audience stood, and it was the most special. I tear up even thinking about it now. The most special moment, because you don't realise, what people think of you or anything else, and it was just such an amazing sort of send-off, and then to have the tribute at the very end, where you could probably see I was blubbing right the way from the start to the finish and couldn't even close the programme, so how professional was that? But it was wonderful, because Wimbledon, such a big part of my life. When I quit playing tennis in the mid-'80s, I thought, I've got to get a job, because we weren't earning the sort of money that they're earning today. And so I went to the BBC and I spoke to the boss of the BBC and I said, can I get a job at Wimbledon, please? I would like to commentate. And he looked at me and he said, Sue, we only cover 2 courts. And he said, with all due respect, you haven't won Wimbledon. He said, whereas Virginia Wade and Ann Jones have, so I'm afraid there is no position for you. So I had to go away and think, what am I going to do now? So I thought, I've got to come in a different door. I can't come in as the commentator. So I went down and worked for Channel 7 in Australia for a few years with a wonderful man called Gordon Bennett. It's the only reason I took his phone call. I got all these messages when I retired, and then I got, phone Gordon Bennett. I thought, who is? I thought it was one of my friends taking the mickey or something. So, and I wouldn't have, if he had just said, I'm the boss of Channel 7, I just would have thought he wanted another interview, which I would have said, no, I'd already done my interviews. So I phoned up and I said, okay, who's this? Can I speak to Gordon Bennett, please? And this lady says, I shall put you through to him now. I'm like, oh, crikey, he exists. And then this man comes on and he just says, yes, I'm Gordon Bennett, the boss of Channel 7. I want to offer you a job. So I was only, I think, unemployed for about an hour and a half, which was great. So I went and worked with Channel 7 for a few years, and then with Sky Television, which was wonderful. I was the only female sports broadcaster back then, and the only one working for Sky. And the Australian boss there gave me a lady producer and a lady PA who does all the counts in my ear. So we used to walk into the office and all the blokes used to say, here they come, Banana-rama, like this as we walked in. And they thought it was an insult. I was incredibly impressed. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. But I was spotted working at Sky from the BBC boss that had turned me down, and then he said, will you come and work in 1993 on the BBC programme with the afternoon session with Dishy Des Lynam. That was no hardship, and co-presenting the highlights show with Harry Carpenter in the evening. And it was wonderful, and there was a lovely story with Des when one of the first afternoons I was working with him. He said, right, Sue, we'll have a little chat, and then I've got to do a few results, these results here. And I saw that there was one really unpronounceable Polish name, beginning with an S, ending in Z. And I said, oh, Des, are you all right with the pronunciation of that? Because I said, I've played it, I know him well, I played mixed doubles with it. He goes, no, I've got it all sorted, I'm fine, Sue, absolutely fine. So there he goes, reading through the results. He goes, Pete Sampras did this, and Mark Cox beat, and he looks at me, the pole. And that's what made Des great. But it was absolutely wonderful. And I went in, and had 30 glorious years working for the BBC, which I will talk about. But the first year after I had this amazing send-off in 2023, I went back to Wimbledon, not really knowing what I was going to do, watched a lot of tennis, but I went to the last 8 club, which Wimbledon have, which is for anyone who's reached the quarterfinals or better in the singles or the semi-finals of the doubles, so the last 8 players in the tournament. And they have a dinner every year as well. And so I went to this dinner, managed to position myself right next to Billie Jean King, as you can probably tell here. I wonder how many you can recognize. I'll go through a few. I don't know them all myself, I've got to say. But Fred Stolle, who was a finalist there 3 times, I think. Jan Kodesh, who won in 73. Judy Tegart, or Judy Dalton, who was a finalist in 68. Gosh, this is testing my memory. Billie Jean, the great Billie Jean, 20 Wimbledon titles. Christine Truman, who lost to Angela Mortimer in the final in 61. Neil Fraser, who won in, I think, 59 and 61. Alan Mills, he was a former referee. I don't know what he was doing in the last 8 club, but anyway. Rosie Casals, Olga Morozova, there's Tom Ocker, John Pace, Joe Jury, Alexander Stevenson, Tanya Harding, I'm going to run out here, Anand Armitage, some man from Ireland. No idea who the man with the Guinness T-shirt is, but I guess he's from Ireland, I don't know. And Tracy Austin, who, she won her first Grand Slam at the age of 16, absolutely incredible. I'm not sure who they are. That's Cara Black, Peter Fleming, Kathy Rinaldi, Alana Kloss, Mark Woodford, and then John Lloyd at the end, and all of that. So we had a sort of fabulous time, and I was walking into the car park one day, and this former player came running up to me, and she went, so, and she gave me this big hug. Her name was Mona Shalau, or she got married, then she became Mona Garant. So I said, hello, Mona, I haven't seen you for a long time. She goes, oh, I just had to say thank you. You're the reason I'm here. I said, sorry, what? And she said, you're the reason I'm in the last 8 club. I went, oh, you're going to tell me that you beat me in the last 16 in 3 sets or something? And she said, no, we made the semi-finals of the doubles. And I looked at her and I said, I've never played doubles with you, Mona. I don't remember ever playing doubles. So we reached the semi-finals of Wimbledon. She said, do you know who we beat in the quarterfinals? And I said, Mona, if I can't remember playing doubles with you, I certainly can't remember who we beat in the quarterfinals. I'm going to give you a clue here. Martina Navratilova and Billie Jean King. She says in 1978, we beat Billie Jean King and Martina in the quarterfinals of the doubles on centre court. I said, Mona, if I'd have done that, the 2 greatest legends in Wimbledon history, I would have the score tattooed on my forehead and a neon sign blinking the result every time someone rang the doorbell. So I said, don't tell me that we beat them. So we had to get out the phones and Google it. And there it was, 6-4 in the third, we beat them. No. How could I forget it? I'm like, how could I possibly forget that? And then she went on, she said, mind you, she said, for the last 10 minutes, for the last 2 games, it started to rain and Billie Jean's glasses were... I said, stop. I said, don't spoil a good story with the facts. You were doing so well, Mona, absolutely so well. But we had such a wonderful time. And Billie Jean has just been the most incredible, first of all, inspiration, then a mentor, and now a great friend. And every year at Wimbledon, she has an Indian takeaway in the flat, just in the flats overlooking the courts. And I go along from a chicken tikka masala with Billie Jean and a few poppadoms and everything else. And she always invites a lot of other players and a lot of friends. And we were there with Betty Stover was there, the lady who beat me in the semi-finals of 1977. I wasn't happy to see her, but, and she had also Christian Anandpur, who is the CNN incredible. She interviews all the political leaders, and she was at the dinner as well. And so Christian was sitting there, Billie was here, I was there. They started talking about what they're doing. And Christian said, well, I'm going off to Eastern Europe. I'm interviewing all these presidents and this, that, and the other over the next month. And Billie Jean said, I've just started a women's ice hockey league in America, and we've got the first games here. And they looked at me and said, what are you doing, Sue? And I thought, oh, God. I'd done a couple of lovely seaborne cruises. I thought, well, that go down well. And, so I lied, basically, and told her I'd written a book, which I hadn't. I hadn't written the book then, so I thought, I've got to go and do it. So I had to write the book, and as soon as I got home, I got on the phone to Matt Dawson and Phil Tufnell. I said, we're coming out of retirement, we're going to the theatres. So we did a theatre tour this year, and we're going to do another one next year. So the boys, at least I've got something I can say. Oh, Billie, I've just got another theatre tour, you know, what can I do? So I wanted to show a picture of my lovely mum and dad, Bob and Betty Barker, bless them. I was the youngest of three, and you never realise as a kid what sacrifices they go through. Driving me, it was about 45 minutes to the tennis courts, the indoor tennis courts. My dad used to always come through and pick me up. All our summer holidays were always where the tournaments were. My poor brother and sister got fed up with Eastbourne and going there every summer for about 3 weeks. But they were absolutely wonderful and let me achieve my dreams, and had to make the decision when I was 17 to go and live in America on my own. And, you know, there were no mobile phones then. I mean, the only way, if I hadn't done well in the tournament and afford to phone, and they didn't have a lot of money, so we couldn't really reverse the charges, had to write on those par avion little letters, those blue things. My writing got smaller as it went on, but they were absolutely wonderful. But the man who totally changed my life was my coach, Arthur Roberts. He came to the school. I was at the Marist Convent in Paynton, and he came along one day to select a few kids and see if they wanted to have tennis lessons. And he said, I'll pick 2 today from this class. And he was looking round, and he picked this first girl called Judy Reeve, who she was the best. And I know I wasn't really the second best, but I was trying to impress him. And he obviously spotted me because he said, I'll take a chance with her. So he said, do you want to play? And I went, yes, please, I'll come and play. So the very next week I go over and I have my half-an-hour lesson with Arthur. And it cost £1 back then. That's how long ago it was. And I took my pound note with me. And so at the end of the lesson, I hand him the pound note, and he just says, do you know what this means? And I went, no, I was only about 10, I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. He goes, it means you're employing me if you're paying me. And so you can tell me what to do. I thought, I was terrified of him, I'm not going to tell him what to do. So he said, if you come back next week and you don't pay me, can I tell you what to do? No, win-win. I thought, my parents will be happy, I can play tennis and it's great. And you know, that's the only money I ever paid him throughout my whole career, and he was my coach right the way through until I sort of quit at 30. And I know you're thinking, she's really tight. How mean not giving this man back the money of making me play, enjoy tennis all around the world. I tried and I tried and I tried to pay him. We weren't earning the money that they're earning today, possibly £150,000 a year. So in the last few years before I retired, I said to him, I've got to pay you 20% of what I'm earning. He said, no, don't want it. He said, you invest it. I said, no, I'm determined, I want to pay. So for 4 years in a row, I paid him 20% of my money, on and off court earnings. What I didn't know was he went to my dad and the two of them went down and opened up investment accounts for me, unit trusts. And he never told me. And I retired in 85, he died in 87. And the first envelopes arrived like in 89, the 5-year or 7-year bond had matured into the most amazing amount of money, 1 tenfold. And every few years this envelope would arrive, and I never got a chance to thank him. It was an incredible man, and just wanted me to do what I love, which was great. And he taught me so many amazing things, to dream big, to always have no regrets, not to fear winning or even fear losing, because you learn so much from both. And he was just wonderful. And he coached other players. Angela Mortimer, he coached her, and Mike Sangster before me. But I was the last one that he had. But a very, very special man indeed. And this is one of my favourite photos. Now, I used to watch Wimbledon on the black and white television, watching Rod Laver. And so Rod Laver, Ken Rosewall, this was when I was 13. They did lower the net, I've got to say, for us to do that. It was such a magical day to go there and have coaching from these two incredible players. And when we stopped for lunch, we all went into this restaurant and we sat down at the table. And I was like a sponge. I was listening to everything they said, just absorbing everything. I was watching what they did. And Ken Rosewall says, can I get 2 fillet steaks and a salad, please? That was an eye-opener for me. I go straight home to my mother, and I go, can I have 2 fillet steaks and a salad, please, from now on? She said, here's your cottage pie, take it or leave it. So that was it. But that was a really magical day. I'll talk very briefly about what I did. You can see that I've actually enjoyed a few seaborne cruises since these photos were taken. But this was at the French Open, which I won in 1976, which Arthur Roberts always said, you know, you can win money, you can have world rankings, but legacy is all about winning the big tournaments. And to win the French Open was an absolute dream of mine, because I knew Wimbledon was going to be tough for me because I was in such an era with the most amazing grass court players. Billie Jean, Martina, Yvonne Goolagong, Virginia Wade. Chrissy played well on the grass too. It was such an incredible era, but winning the French Open was magical. But of course I thought it was the first of many, so I didn't really celebrate that well. If I'd known it was my only one, I really would have gone to town. But and I'm going to show another one, because I don't really want to show you any photos from Wimbledon, because there weren't any with my arms like that, other than I made the quarterfinals twice and the semi-finals in 1977, and losing, as I said, to Betty Stover. And it was such a painful loss, because I'd beaten Betty already 3 times that year. Just before I walked onto the court for that semi-final, Virginia Wade had beaten Chrissy Evert. So suddenly, I know I'd beaten Virginia like 3 times in the year. I thought, I'm going to win Wimbledon. And of course, you know, you hear it all the time, don't you? I'm just going to stay in the moment. That's what all these players talk about. I'm just going to stay in the moment. I should have listened to them. I didn't stay in the moment. I was already meeting the Queen and lifting the trophy up above me. And I paid the ultimate price of playing like an absolute idiot and losing in 3 sets. So we will move on quickly from that one. So I just want to talk a little bit more about these 2 amazing ladies, because Billie Jean I first met when I was 14, went to play in America, and she sat all the juniors down and talked about how we had to sell women's tennis and how we had to promote it. And she was saying things like, if you get asked to do an interview, just ask them, where do you want to meet, at what time, you do it. You've got to protect tennis and promote it for the next generation of players. And no one did that better than her. But when she won the Battle of the Sexes in 1973 against Bobby Riggs at Madison Square Garden, my coach, Arthur, phoned me and he said, Sue, your hobby has just become a career. Congratulations. And we started off playing tournaments, because Billie started the Virginia Slim circuit. We started playing tournaments at tennis clubs with about 1,000 to 2,000 people. Within 2 years, we were selling out Madison Square Garden. It just absolutely exploded. And it was all thanks to the wonderful Billie Jean. And Martina and I are the same age, grew up together in Europe, playing all the same tournaments. But of course, there were no internet, no videos of anything. I used to always read about her, you know, how well she was doing, and she was the next big thing. And I was doing quite well, so I got a few little headlines. And then we were playing in Spain in the Princess Sofia Cup, which was for under 16s. We were both 13 at the time. And she's on the court next to me. And we're both sort of looking at each other thinking, oh, I've heard about her. And I'm watching her, and there's this wonderful lefty serve, and she's so athletic. She comes in, and she half volleys, and then boom, lovely winner for the volley. And I remember thinking, oh dear, this is not going to be easy. And we had wonderful battles. I did manage to beat her probably on about 6 occasions. She beat me over 30. But anyway, she was so wonderful, and about 2016 she asked me if I would do a documentary on her life. And we flew back to what was then Czech Republic, to her hometown of Revnici. And she talked, I mean, it was so emotional, talking about how the war was affecting it, how her father said, you've got to leave. And she was only 16 at the time. and the tanks were rolling in, and he said, if you don't leave now and defect to America, he said, you will never get out, you will never follow your dream of playing tennis. And so she had to leave literally within 2 days, and he said, please don't say goodbye to your mother. He said, you won't be able to, she couldn't deal with it, Martina couldn't deal with it, so they packed her off and she left. And she didn't see her mum for another 2 years. And it was down to the Duchess of Kent, actually, at Wimbledon, because when Martina defected in 77, she won it in Wimbledon in 78. There was no one from her family there to watch it in the court. So the next year, the Duchess of Kent intervened and asked, could they allow? So they allowed not her father, but just her mother to be able to come to Wimbledon, and she won it again, which was great. But I suddenly thought of the sacrifices I did, and trying to go over to America when I was 17. It just made me realize just, everything she went through, and just the most lovely, lovely person and lovely friend. These are two more of my absolute favorites. We were always calling ourselves the Three Shrimps. Now listen, Chrissy and I are, I've shrunk an inch now, but we were 5'6". Tracy, 5'4". I don't know what heels she's wearing there, but she officially is 5'4". But they are two of my very special guests at Wimbledon. We always have such a wonderful laugh. And I get asked a lot, who's your favourite Wimbledon guest? And everyone obviously thinks I'm going to say Roger. But no, it isn't. It's Piers Brosnan. And I'll tell you why. It's not the obvious reason. Well, there's something to do with it, I guess. But this was pre the roof at Wimbledon. So this was the roof started in 2009. So this was early in 2000s. And we were filling. It was raining and raining and raining, and we were filling. Anyone who walked past my studio, we got them in for a chat. I was talking for hours. And we got towards the 6 o'clock news, and they just said, we need one big guest to close the show and go to the 6 o'clock news. So who's around? They'd all gone home. We went round ESPN, we went round all the other networks. Has anyone still got anyone famous working here? No one. So we then scanned the Royal Box list. Saw Piers Brosnan. He's having a cup of tea up in the Royal Box. Let's see if he'll come in. So they rushed down and asked Piers if he'll come and talk to me in the studio and close the show. And he said, yes, I'd love to. He said, well, it's sort of 20 to 6 now. Really need you there in 5 minutes. And it's quite a long walk down the stairs of the Royal Box, around past 2 courts, and then up 2 flights of stairs into my studio. He's Bond, isn't he? I mean, he ran. He ran and he got there for 5:45. I'd been very busily Googling Remington Steele and James Bond and trying to come up with a few questions, but luckily he knew so much about tennis, it was lovely. So he came in the studio. I said, thanks ever so much, Piers. He said, it's a bit hot in here, isn't it? I said, yeah. We've had the lights on all day. I said, I've been talking. So he sat down in the chair. And they came and they put a bit of makeup on him. So, he's sweating a bit. We better just put a bit of no shine on him, So he put this on him. And I started interviewing him, and he was doing really well. And then all of a sudden, just started to sweat. He started to sweat. So I could hear in my ear, they saying, we need to get makeup into Piers' soup. Just talk over these few results while we just get makeup to Piers. And I said, okay, fine. So I did these few results, and there they are, dabbing him down. As I turned around to talk to him for the last sort of 5 minutes, he's now covered in bits of tissue paper. If you've ever blotted yourself with it all gets stuck. I'm like, oh my God, and they're all in my ear. They go, oh God, what's Piers done? So I said, oh gosh, Piers, I said, the tissue's on your face. I said, don't worry about it. Anyway, I said, we've only got 5 minutes for the 6 o'clock news. So he tried to carry on, and after about 2 minutes, he was sweating even more, and it was just awful. And he just said, Sue, can I go? And he said, I'm dying here. And you regret things. And I really regretted this. It was actually billed as the worst line ever delivered at Wimbledon. I said, Piers, die another day. I said, Piers, die another day. We need to get to the 6 o'clock news, and I've got 2 more minutes. And bless him, he did. He sat there for the next 2 minutes. So Piers Brosnan is my absolute favourite, Chrissy was the best player I ever played. It was like hitting against a brick wall. She got everything back. She ran well. I only beat her twice. And again, loads of times she beat me. But she was wonderful. But there was one match that we played, which was one of my most memorable, was at Madison Square Garden. You can't imagine what it's like. I mean, I love centre court at Wimbledon, but Madison Square Garden, 20,000 people. We sold it out every year for the women's finals. And I got through to the final. I beat Martina and Virginia en route to the final to play Chrissy. And I was very nervous. I was waiting for the final, but I was playing really well, so I was quite confident. And then around the corner sweeps Chrissy in a long fur coat when it was cool to wear fur. And she came with this long fur coat. And on her arm, Burt Reynolds. She was dating Burt Reynolds. I didn't care. I was just looking at him. And she said, well, and I said, is Burt staying? She says, yes. He said, Burt Reynolds is going to watch me play tennis. I was so excited. And I won the first set, 6-2. Won't go on to the scores for the next two, needless to say. But Burt Reynolds watched me play tennis. That was magical. But no, she's such a wonderful friend, and she's battled cancer twice now. So has Martina, and it's been, we try and support each other through all of it. So it's wonderful that we can be such good friends with everything we went through all those years ago. I think because we didn't have coaches and entourages, so we were everything to each other. The shoulder to cry on, someone to celebrate with. We were sort of everything to each other, so the friendships never die. Now this is possibly my favourite photo. This was at Wimbledon. This was 2012. This was because Andy Murray was playing Federer in the final, and this is the first time that these three had been back on centre court together, because Bjorn very, very rarely comes, and Jimmy had only just started working with us. So we arranged for them to do the preview to the final on centre court. So I said, oh, that's going to be mayhem. All the crowd's going to go nuts. And I said, let's make a big entrance. So Max said, well, I'll walk down from the roll box with the two boys and we'll walk on, get a round of applause, and then we'll do the interview. And we didn't tell anyone that these three were going to come out. So it was a huge surprise, not only to the crowd, but to all the broadcasters, the photographers, and the media. Suddenly, the media room was like scrambling to get to centre court. And all these photographers were falling over each other, saying, we want photos, look here, photo. Yeah, I want a photo. So I had to go over to them and say, listen, guys, listen. I said, you'll get your photo, but I put on my best headmistress voice. And I said, you'll get your photo, but at the end of the interview, I'll make sure you get your photo, but please just be quiet so we can do 10-minute, 15-minute build-up to the finals. He said, okay. So we did the build-up to the final, which they were all magnificent, of course. And then I suddenly thought, okay. And I said, will you all do photos? They said, yeah, we'll do photos. And I thought, I'm not going to let this go. So I just grabbed hold of Mac and grabbed hold of Jim and stood there. Photographers didn't want me in it at all. And I looked at the Wimbledon, I said, get that photo, I want it photo. And so he got me the photo, and it's in the hallway now, pride of place. So where my score against Billie Jean and Martina will soon be arriving as well. But it was a really magical time. Need I say more? Shall we just sit and look at him for a while? Because as you can see, that's all I did. I mean, my husband said, look at that photo, that's pathetic. But honestly, isn't he wonderful? He dresses well, he walks well, he even smells nice. I mean, come on, what is wrong? He was just the loveliest person to interview. I can't fault him. And the magical times we had at Wimbledon. When he first won his Wimbledon, he says, you made me cry. I didn't make him cry when he first won his first Wimbledon in 2002. But I was sort of determined that I wouldn't cry when I was saying my farewell, so I didn't do very well either. But he's such an amazing guy, and for many people, the greatest of all time. But of course, the record books will go on to say he is, Novak is. And I chose this photo as the online as the on-court interviews, because I think it's the only one that I'm actually in. But with my lovely cameraman Howard, I started doing the interviews on court in the year 2000. So I did them for 23 years. And Howard was always my cameraman. And we always started off talking about holidays and stuff. And then all of a sudden we started talking about chiropractors and back pain and goodness. He had more of an excuse than I did. But Djokovic is incredible, what he has achieved, and particularly in this era, playing against Roger, Rafa, and Andy. So you cannot argue with the record books. I remember the first time I ever walked on court to do the interview in 2000, I was ever so nervous. I was thinking, oh, I hope that mic works, you know. And I was standing there, and my producer in my ear said, "Are you ready, Sue?" And I went, "Yeah, I'm ready. So he said, "Right, go on, cue, on you go." And I had to interview, obviously, the runner-up first and then the winner. So I walked onto court, and he suddenly in my ear says, "Sue Barker walking onto centre court." He said, "Just the estimated 500 million people watching you right now." If my mic wasn't live, I said, that didn't help. You know, that didn't help. But I went on to interview. The first champion I interviewed was Venus Williams, and Venus is a real fashionista, you know, it's wonderful. And I'd gone, and because it was my first year, I'd really splurged on a beautiful suit and a beautiful pair of shoes, and I walked out onto court. And as Venus walked up, she just looked me up and down, and she goes, first words on the mic, "Great shoes, Sue." I thought, I've cracked it. I interviewed her about another 8 times, either as a runner-up or a winner, never mentioned anything else I was wearing, so I obviously got it wrong after that. But you know, they were really sort of special times. But the most special was Andy Murray. 2012 was possibly the most difficult interview I ever had on that court, when he lost to Roger Federer, and he broke down in tears and talked about how he'd let the nation down. He hadn't, you know, it was heartbreaking to watch. And I think everyone then saw how much it meant to him and what, you know, how much he wanted to win Wimbledon. And to come back the following year and to beat this man who was, you know, probably the hardest person to beat in the final was truly magical. And I have this little script that Wimbledon always gives me, like, you know, the runner-up for, you know, 2013 is blah, blah, blah. And then the gentleman's singles champion of whatever year is, that's what I've got to say, the gentleman's singles champion for this year. So when Andy beat Novak, I'm looking at the script. So already the audience is ready for Andy to come on, you know, to come out to get his trophy. And oh, they're going like this. And I'm going, I can't say the gentleman's singles champion of 2013. So I went off script. I went, "We've waited 77 years for this. The Wimbledon champion is Britain's Andy Murray," like this. And of course the crowd went nuts, and I got in awful trouble. Yeah. "Keep to the script, Sue. We don't want to turn this into the US Open." So I said, but anyway, I did what I thought was right, and do that for Andy. And Andy, and to go back on to do his farewell interview just last summer was on centre court when he lost the doubles with his brother Jamie. Just to go on court and do that was incredibly special, and I've got to say a huge thank you to the BBC for allowing me to come back to do that, because, you know, I did his first interview at Wimbledon, and to do his last one was really rather special. Here's another one I quite like, you see. You can tell all these lovely photos I've got. The wonderful Bjorn. You'll remember him when he came to Wimbledon with his long blonde hair, his bandana, and his shoulders were about this wide, and he was super fit in his feeler outfit. It was gorgeous. You know, my coach always told me to dream big. I dreamed I'd be Mrs. Borg. He wasn't interested, but I got close to him once because we played an exhibition match in Hilton Head Island in South Carolina, and it was 4 women and 4 men, and the 4 men were, let's see if I can remember them, Bjorn, Arthur Ashe, Roscoe Tanner, and Ilia Nastasi. And I know, great lineup there. And the women were Martina Navratilova, Yvonne Goolagong, Virginia Wade, yours truly, let the side down. But anyway, I was in there, and we had to play singles, doubles, and mixed. And you got points for how many sets you won, how many matches you won, you add up, and then they have a winner at the end who gets the most money. I think it was something like £70,000, which back in 76, 77 was a huge amount of money. There was about a £10,000 difference between number one and number two. And Martina had done really well and won the singles, so she was sort of top of the leaderboard. And it all came down to the final of the mixed doubles as who would get the top prize, either Bjorn or Martina. Now, Bjorn and I played in the semi-finals, and we beat Arthur Ashe and Yvonne Goolagong, which was pretty special. I remember going up to him the day before, and I said, would you like to sit down and just have a talk through some tactics and everything? I thought, try not to be too obvious. He went, no. So then, he said, we'll just busk it, we'll just busk it. So we went out and we won. So now the final, and we were playing Ilie Nastase and Martina. So it was like the little blondes against the Eastern Europeans, and the crowd really took to us, and because Ilie was playing up as only Ilie can. And so when Martina was serving, like Bjorn held his serve, Ilie held his, I held mine. So now Martina's serving, and Bjorn comes over and he finally speaks to me and he says, Sue, just go down Ilie's line. I said, okay. He's going to try and show you up. Just go down his line. Oh, okay. So I managed to run round, get my forehand, bang, went straight down the line. Ilie was crossing past him, perfect, winner. Crowd went nuts. Bjorn's smiling at me. And it's a win-win. And so the very next point that I was returning, he said, do the same. He's going to do it even more. So I did it again, and I passed him again, and it was great. And then we broke Martina's serve, and I was dead chuffed, and I went back, and I sat at the chair next to Bjorn, moving the chair a little closer. And Ilie suddenly walks over and he goes, don't ever do that to me again. I had his picture on my wall when I was growing up. I kissed him goodnight every night. And the first words he says to me is, don't ever do that to me again. And so Bjorn got right up in his face and said, you never speak to her like that again. He said, and I was like, oh, my hero. And we won 6-4, 6-3. And he won the top prize, and I thought, we're undefeated. We must play again. Never saw him again. No. But at least I have that wonderful memory of him. Anyway, these two I absolutely love. And Boris, I don't know whether you've read the book that he's just brought out. Very, very moving. All the mistakes that he says he's made, and he's turned his life around, and I hope he'll be back at Wimbledon next year. And Tim, I first met Tim when he was 12 years old, and I was I helped do some coaching at a David Lloyd club. And David asked me if I'd go and help coach some of the kids, so I said yes, I would. So Tim was one of them. And then he said, will you live near the school where the boys go? And I said, yes, I do. He said, well, could you drive them home? And I said, yeah, okay, in the minibus. There's about 12 of them. He said, yeah, okay, I'll drive them back. So I became known as Auntie Sue. And aunties, they didn't even criticize my driving. And I drove them back. And then one day they got in, this was weeks later, and they were all very, very down. I said, what's wrong with you? And Tim said, David's changed our diet. We're not allowed to have any burgers or any Coca-Cola. We've just got to have plain pasta, milk, and a banana. I went, oh dear. So I said, who fancies a burger? So I said, I'll stop at the fast food place on the way home, or fill up with petrol and get them a Coca-Cola or a Mars bar. And at Wimbledon, when I was having a live interview with Tim and Mac, and we're talking about their successes at Wimbledon, Tim blamed me for the fact that he never won Wimbledon. Because I compromised his athletic diet at a very early age. But the worst one, and Tim was involved in this, the gaffes that you do on air. My worst gaffe came in 1999. I was doing the highlights program with Pam Shriver, and Steffi Graf had just announced her retirement, but she was playing the final that day against Lindsay Davenport, and she lost the final. And we were going to close our show with a tribute to an amazing champion. She won it 7 times. And it didn't quite go to the script with her losing, but we still said we're still going to celebrate her amazing career. So we had like a 3.5, 4-minute montage of her greatest moments. So my producer says, right, Sue, just think of a link into it, and we'll go off with 3.5, 4 minutes of great Steffi action. I said, okay, I'll do that. So I thought, right, with 10 seconds to go, I'll come up with, and I watched Steffi as she left centre court and waved to the crowd. So I thought, right, my last 10 seconds, I'll thank Pam Schreiber, who I was working with, thank Pam and say, right, so today Steffi Graf waved an emotional farewell to her beloved centre court, but at least she walks away with some great memories into the lovely montage of all her greatest memories. And just to tell you, in television back then, if you get to 0 on the hard count in your ear, they cut you off and they go back to television centre. So you've got to time your last words to go 2, 1, 0, you're off. So I thought, right, I must do that 10 seconds. So with about 2 minutes to go, I can hear the producer go, where's the graph montage? Where's the VT? What can we play at the end of the show? I'm like, oh no. I was thinking, oh, what am I going to do? I was chatting with Pam, obviously she's not on talkback, so I'm thinking, oh dear. And he's going, Sue, if we haven't got this, you've got to fill for another 3.5 minutes, so just be warned. I thought, oh, I'm like, okay. So this and that. Have we got the VT? Have we got the VT? I think we might have it with about 2 minutes to go. We're going to get it online, Sue. I think we're going to have it. I'm like, oh, crikey, what am I doing here? So with about 30 seconds to go, he said, yes, it's on cue, it's on X, we're going to run it, Sue, we're going to run it. So thank Pam and just get into your closing link. So with about 15 seconds to go, I'm like this now. Because all of a sudden he said, well, where's the closing credits now? Where's the closing credits? Who's lost that? We've got to run those at the end of the montage. It's all going off in my ear. So I said, oh, Pam, thank you very much, for your comments like this. And so I went into my closing look. I said, so today, Steffi Graf waved an emotional farewell to her beloved centre court, but at least she walks away with some great memories. And I got cut off. Oh, I was mortified. The daytime producer burst through the doors of the studio and said, Sue, at least you were factually correct. And Tim made them replay it on a 10th anniversary, so I have him. Right, just a couple more things I just really want to talk about, because I haven't really got any more, but just... what shall I... Yeah, the one I mostly want to talk about, I'll talk about a little bit about Question of Sport, because love it so much. We all got the sack. We didn't know we were getting the sack. Phil Tufnell thought he was going in for a pay rise, and in typical Tuffers fashion, but it all went sort of pear-shaped, but we had glorious time there. And we didn't mind leaving the job, because we'd known for the last 3 years that they wanted to move it on and try and appeal to a younger audience. So it was only a matter of time. But the way they handled it at the end and wanted us to issue a press release as though we had walked away from the show, and we said, we're not going to sign that. And then they said, well, Sue, can you say you're leaving for the good of the show? No, I won't. What does that mean? So we didn't do that. But we had one, I think two favourite memories quickly of Question of Sport. One was the guests were on one team with Ali McCoy's Dickie Bird and Ilya Nastasi, and with John Parrott was George Best and Jenny Pittman. I mean, it was wonderful. And we started recording, and Ali started talking to Bestie and Illy about everything that they got up to together, which was very entertaining, let me tell you. And all the nights out that the three of them had together and all this sort of stuff. So we're recording, we're going in. We haven't even started the quiz yet. So the producer comes into my ear, he goes, Sue, we've been recording for 43 minutes. We've only got 1 minute 30 we can use at 7:30 on a Friday night. Can you get on with the quiz? So I got on with the quiz. I got booed by this 200 studio audience. All got up and booed me, but we did it. But one of my favourite memories, and it's certainly not Matt Dawson's favourite, was when George Foreman, the great George Foreman, came on the show. And he arrived in this massive limousine television centre. And he got out of the car like a real superstar. It was huge, And these three guys got out the door and stood up next to him. I thought they were his bodyguards. Well, they sort of were, but they were also his sons. His sons, George Foreman 2, George Foreman 3, George Foreman 4. He's actually got another son, George Foreman 5. You can Google it, they're all called George Foreman. So he went, this is George Foreman, George Foreman, George Foreman, okay. And so George came into the office and he goes, who's going to interview me? I said, oh, George, it's not an interview, it's a quiz. He said, I was told I was coming in to flog my grills, you know. He said, I'm coming in as a... He said, I'm not doing a quiz. I said, well, that's the only thing we're doing in this studio. I said, you'll be fine. I said, we'll get the grills in. And so he sat down in the chair. He looked absolutely miserable. And so we thought, oh no, picture board, please, let it be a boxer. And the first picture that Matt's team picked up was a boxer. We're like, hallelujah, we'll get George in the game. He'll love it from now on. So we said, Matt goes, George, go on, tell Sue who it is. This guy standing with his world championship belt. And George goes, I don't know. We're all thinking, oh no, the producers are all groaning. So I'm looking at Matt and I'm going, keep going, like, keep going. So he said, now come on, George, look, is he Mexican or is it Cuban? He's got the middleweight belt, title belt, so he's a middleweight world champion. Who's the middleweight world champion at the moment, George? He goes, I don't care. Now it's getting really embarrassing. We can't use any of this either. We're going to show him up. So Dawes, in true lovely little Dawes fashion, puts his arm round him. He said, come on, George, we're not going till we get this. And he touched him on the knee like this. And he goes, come on, tell Sue who it is. George just looks at him and he goes, don't you ever touch me again. I can tell you it was the longest hour of my life getting to the end of that show. Needless to say, George never troubled the scoreboard, and poor old Matt has nightmares about it. But just as that was happening, it was Ali on the other side when he was going, don't ever touch me again. And we're all like this. Ali suddenly pipes out, hey, George, got any grills in the boot of your car? Like this. I'm like, not now, not now, Ali, not now. But anyway, look, I'll just briefly tell you my favourite day I ever had in my life. It's not a tennis day, and I know I'm supposed to be talking about Wimbledon, but my favourite day in my life was when I was invited to Buckingham Palace. I came down the stairs of my house. There's this beautiful envelope with the crown on it, and it says, you've been invited to a private lunch with Her Majesty the Queen and His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh. I thought, me? So I phoned up, I said, have you got the right Sue Barker? He said, yes. He said, we're coming. We want you to talk about the Olympics. He said, they have these private lunches where people come in and they discuss what they're up to. So you can come in and talk about the Olympics that was going to be in 2012. This was in 2011 when I got the invite. He said, there's only 8 people at the lunch, and it's very, very nice. I thought, wow, that's amazing. So I dressed really nicely, and I thought, what should I do? And I was living in the Cotswolds, so I thought, I'll just drive down, because I've done a lot of interviews at Buckingham Palace, and they've got a little car park round the back. I could just nip in there, it'll be fine. So I drove my little blue Mini down, when Minis were real Minis back in 2011. And so I was driving my little blue Mini, and I came to the gates of Buckingham Palace and got my invitation, and I said, I know where to park. He said, oh, welcome, Miss Barker. Yeah, welcome. I said, I know where to park round the corner. I said, oh, no, not today, Miss Barker. You're a special guest. You can drive straight through to the quadrangle. I drove through those gates, and I'm driving in my little blue Mini, and I'm like, there wasn't a person, another car. I was driving around like Mr. Bean did at the 2012 Olympics. I'm like, oh, where do I park? Where do I park? Oh, and this policeman came out and pointed, just park it here. So I parked it there. I got out my car, and asked me why, but I locked it. Didn't go down too well with the policeman, I can tell you. So we went in and we had lovely drinks with Her Majesty and the Duke of Edinburgh, and then we went through and had this most gorgeous lunch. And I was sitting next to the Duke of Edinburgh, the Queen was opposite, and on my right was a wonderful guy called, I just call him David, he's the managing director of a major hotel in London who had just hosted the Middletons when Catherine and Wills had got married the year before, so he was invited. And he and the Duke of Edinburgh had an unbelievable sense of humour. The three of us were just laughing our socks off for the whole lunch, and we were talking about the Olympics and doing all sorts. And so we had a fabulous lunch, And then the Queen and the Duke got up, and corgis, and they all left with the corgis, and the Queen said, "But we'd love you to join us for coffee in the Blue Room when you're ready." "Oh, thank you very much," so we all stood there while they left the room. Wow, wasn't that special? We were all chatting about how special it had been. So then David looked at me and said, "Sue, we can't let this moment go without a memento." He said, "You've got a handbag, you take the menus, and I'll get the name tags." And so he put the name tags in his pocket, I put the menus in my handbag. And we walked off, we had coffee with the Queen, and then she left, and then we said, should we go out and divvy out the spoils? I'll give you the menu, we'll go outside. And we were giggling our way down the stairs as we walked out towards Buckingham Palace. As we got to the door, there was this beautiful courtier there, was standing there all dressed up with these two beautiful carrier bags, all embossed with a crown and that. And he said, "David, Sue, here we are, a few mementos for you for the day." We stopped in our tracks, and he said, "You see, you didn't have to take the ones on the table." Oh my God. Yes, it's official. I stole from the Queen. I never was able to tell my mother the truth. She would have disowned me. But no, it was such a fabulous day, and she made us so special. I'm still in touch with David. We still laugh about it to this day. But I suddenly thought, with all the silver that was there, and all the, the candles and the salt and pepper shake, of course there were cameras looking to make sure no one was stealing anything. At least we only took the menus and the thing. But anyway, that's my favourite, well, not my favourite memory. I was sort of cringe about it, but it was an absolute fabulous day. Look, I've only got a few minutes left, but if anyone has any questions, anyone have any questions at all?
I've just got one, Sue. That was absolutely amazing. Thank you. Really amazing. So, of course, our question is, we'd like you to come back another year. So, can you write another book, you think, for next year?
I've got many more. If there's no other question, I will tell you one other story then, of another very embarrassing moment. Seems to follow me around. But my husband and I were invited to Ted Heath's home in Salisbury. Beautiful home. It's Salisbury, isn't it? Yeah, Salisbury. And we were invited there as a special lunch to celebrate Sir Steve Redgrave. Oh, I don't think it was a Sir then, but anyway, Steve Redgrave, who'd won his 5th Olympic gold medal. And because I'd presented the Olympics, I was invited. I took my husband Lance with me, and as we came to, and I thought, what do I take Ted Heath when he's hosting us for lunch? I can't get him flowers or chocolate. So I remember that lovely Alan Titchmarsh, who I met last year, did a feature with him in his garden, and I know he loves his garden. Right, I'll get him a beautiful pot plant that he can enjoy in the house and then plant out in his garden, because I do that all the time. I thought, perfect. So I'm standing there with my pot plant outside the door with my husband when Sir Chris Chataway arrives with his wife, and I've obviously known Sir Chris for the athlete who did the 4-minute mile with Roger Bannister, and he had been an MP with Sir Ted. So they arrived, and we were thinking, oh, this is very exciting, isn't it? Ted Heath opened the door, so Sir Chris and his wife welcomed him. He said, "Oh, welcome," he says to us. And so I said, "Ted, this is for you." And he looked at this plant, and he went, handed it to his, didn't even say thank you. He said, "What's this?" Gave it to the thing. So anyway, he then took us on a tour of his house, all of his wonderful sailing photos, and took us, or gave us all the stories. I mean, it was wonderful. He was so nice. And then we get to this room, and he said, "Right, boys," he said, "if you can go in there, you ladies can go in there. There's people already in there for the lunch." My husband's looking at me, he goes, "Well, where are we going?" And he goes, "It's the toilet over here." He said, "I don't want to go." And I said, "Well," Ted said, "Gentlemen, go there." So Chris said to Lance, he said, "Well, I may as well go while I'm here." So Lance said, "Oh, I'll stand outside and watch." And so this lady and I, Sir Chris' wife, go in, and we're standing with this about 20 people that he'd invited for lunch. And then the next minute, Sir Chris, Ted, and my husband walk in, and Ted grabs a champagne, puts his hand on my husband's shoulder and goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, lift your glasses, because this man deserves a glass of champagne. 5 Olympic gold medals. I'm like, no. I mean, my husband's 6'2" and he's got blonde hair, but he's no Steve Redgrave. I know, he's like a monster. I was like, oh my, and my husband like, I mean, so I had to go up and I go, oh, Ted. I said, this is my husband, Lance. I said, this isn't Sir Steve. And he goes, oh, what the hell do you do then? He said, like, I'm in the Met, I'm in the police. He said, like this. Anyway. So he went over and he sat in this window seat, staring out the garden, not even looking or speaking to anyone in the room. With the best comedic timing, Sir Steve enters the room with his wife, Anne. And everyone's like, oh, God. And I had to go up to him and say, I said, we'll fill you in a bit later, but just have a glass of champagne. And Ted never spoke to him for the whole afternoon. He moved the naughty people down one end of the table. He had this big long table in there, and Steve, Anne, Lance and I were down this end. He was down there, and he had a bell that he rang between courses. I tell you, we had the quickest lunch. He was ringing the bell, ringing the bell next course, ringing the bell next course. We were in and out in about, an hour and a quarter. But we had such a laugh when we told Steve about it. And even to this day, Steve, I often see him at different sporting things, he goes, how's the real Steve getting on, And we send each other Christmas cards, and it's always, to the real Steve. And that's, but that was another funny story, but anyway, and embarrassing. If there aren't any more questions, because I have overrun a few minutes. Nobody? Anyway, thank you. You've been a lovely audience. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Sue, Isle of Wight. Is that something on your agenda normally?
Well, my sister lived on the Isle of Wight for a while at Freshwater, and she was the head of a primary school over there, so I used to go and visit her a lot. So, yeah, absolutely, have been here many times before. But was really looking forward to coming here. I enjoy book festivals, are something I really enjoy. So it's nice and just seeing who they've got here, such a wide variety of people. There's sort of something for everyone. So I just thought it was amazing how many different subjects people are talking about. It's fantastic.
And your subject today, of course, is tennis.
Yes, exactly. Well, I can't really talk about it. It would be a very short talk if it was anything else. But I wrote my autobiography, and then I brought out a book about Wimbledon because Wimbledon was my passion. Tournament that I absolutely loved and was lucky enough to play there and then work on it. So there were so many stories, and there were so many stories I couldn't get in my autobiography. So I thought, right, I'll do a special one about Wimbledon and the people who inspired me and the people that I've enjoyed interviewing. So it was an absolute pleasure to write, and it made me realise just how lucky I've been and to have met all those people and had those wonderful memories.
What makes Wimbledon so special then?
Well, I think it's the prestige of it. I mean, I go around the world interviewing players, and they all single out Wimbledon as the place they always wanted to win. And these are foreign. Billie Jean King, that was it. She just said she walked into centre court for the very first time when she was a teenager and just fell in love with it and felt the magic of it. And she says there's no other tournament that has the history and of all the great champions that have played there before. And I think also the grass courts and the all-white rule, and no advertising boards around the courts make Wimbledon stand out. All the other Grand Slams have got flashing lights and coloured clothing and black tennis shoes and all this. Wimbledon is just green, white, and for me, it's that makes it stand above the others. But prestige-wise, all the players, even Rafael Nadal, who grew up loving the clay courts and wanted to win the French Open, his dream was always to win Wimbledon because it was something he grew up watching as a kid. And that's what I did. I grew up watching it as a kid, when we had our black and white telly. And so that was always my dream to get there. So, yeah, special place.
Well, enjoy your presentation here at Northwood House, and there are tennis courts there, so if you need a little knock-up beforehand.
Excellent. Yes, I'll have to get my ankle straps on. The old Achilles aren't as strong as they used to be.